Well, on a smart car, it's not just the struts. You know, a strut, it has the shock and the spring on it. The smart car, they sell the strut and the shock separately. So you can take the spring off, or you can change out the shock, either or. But when you order the parts, they give it to you separately. So I'm going to take off the front bumper. It's pretty easy to do. It's got 4 bolts here inside the door. I already took those out. You know, it just looks like that. There's 4 screws on both sides. And then you also got to take off the cover for the aerial, and there's another cover just like it on the other side. So behind that cover there's another screw. You'll probably have to unscrew the aerial. And then behind the grill, I think there's 2, maybe 4 screws, 2 on either side. And how you take the grill off, there's a clip in there. You see the little slot. So you get a flat screwdriver, put it in there and just pry down, and the grill will pop out. And then after you get all those out, there's clips on the underside. It's already unclipped. It just snaps in place, so you just unsnap it. And then the whole front cover comes off. Yeah, both front springs in this car are broken in it, so when you get a few miles on the smart car, that's usually what happens. The springs aren't exactly heavy duty. Here's some new ones. You know, very light alloy spring. You know, they're not very heavy duty springs. You know, very light. So after a while they tend to break. So if that happens, you don't need to order a strut, you just need to order some springs, most likely. But if it bottomed out on the struts like this one did, and you've been driving it for a while, chances are you're going to need struts too. Or shocks. I ordered a shock for the one side. I only ordered one because they're like $200 a shock. So I was trying to save some money. If it needs the one on the other side, then I'll change it. But I'm going to put a new shock on the driver's side. I don't hear any crunching, so it must be. So about there is where the car should be sitting normally. I don't see any tire weights. Spring is definitely broken. I think that one's broken. Brakes don't look too bad, but I got new brakes and new rotors for it, so I'll put those in. So if you buy a smart car, make sure you get yourself a good set of torque sockets and a good set of torque screwdrivers. Because everything on a smart car is Torx. So the lights are held on by 4 screws. No! Oh, like that. Goes on sideways. There you go. Okay. And then to remove the light clip, you just squeeze it on the side and wiggle it back and forth, and then it'll come off. The best way to remove a shock in these smart cars is to use a clamping block. There isn't any other way that works well. The nut has to come off before you can remove the shock, so it has to be done while on the car. You might be able to do this with a pair of vice grips, but probably not. This is a clamp block from the Evolution website. You can clamp it on and put a wrench on the clamp block. Here's one from eBay. You can try a socket and an Allen key, but that's probably not going to work. The nut is most likely too tight or rusted. I took a grinder and ground a flat spot so I could get a hold of it with a pipe wrench, but I also ruined the shock. I had success welding a wrench up high on the shock on the passenger side, but I had to cut the spring to do so. You can watch how I did it, but the best way is with a clamp block. Allen keys, so many Allen keys. What size shall it be that I use? I don't know. I use this one. Shit. Okay, I don't know where that went. Yeah, it just spun in there, didn't it? Yeah, it did. And once I get that nut off, it should drop down. And then I pull those two out, and then I pull the strut out the top. I tried working on it and then decided not to. So I need a chisel in there. Somebody took it off once before. Yeah, gotta get a new cap too. Screwdriver is a little bit tiny for doing this kind of thing, but it's working. There we go. And then that bolt comes off, and then the strut pops out. And then you unbolt it at the top, and there you go. And I imagine that bolt holds everything tight together, so never taken it off before, so we'll see. And it's the same E14 socket as the clamp for the strut, so you don't have to change sockets. So that's kind of cool. One's quite a bit tighter. The alternative is, if you have a really good pair of vice grips, you can clamp them on the top of the shock tower. You want to clamp it right near the top. You don't want to clamp it somewhere down here in the bottom apart. If you're reusing the strut, don't clamp it anywhere where it's going to go back into the strut after it's reassembled. Like, you know, the car's going over bumps. The strut is going to go up and down, and that rod is going to go into the strut. So if you mar up the rod, it's going to cut the seal in the strut, and then you're going to ruin the strut. So clamp it near the top.
To hear your name, or someone's laugh that is the same, but I've forgotten you just like I should. What a guy. What a fool.
Yeah. Okay, pipe wrench this. I marred the shaft up already, so let's see what's the easiest thing to do. No, I can't get the grinder in there. We'll get the sawzall. That one's pretty much garbage. This one's pretty much garbage. So I'll have to try cutting it on the tip or try cutting it on the back. That's a little bit long, isn't it? You know, I'm thinking that that shaft is probably harder than the sawzall blade. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that shaft on the shock is harder than the steel on the blade. Didn't even make a scratch on it. So, you want to cut that off. The grinder is the only way to do it, actually. The wrench doesn't really sit on there that well. Need a 21mm socket would work the best, but the wrench will do it as long as I can clamp that shaft. As long as I can clamp that shaft, I think I'll go get a bigger grinding disc, and I'll grind one side flat, and I'll grind the other side flat, and then the other side flat, until I get a surface I can get some bite on. Even if I cut this off, I can't slide it out. So all I can really do is grind it so I have some kind of bite with the pipe wrench. So I'll put a bunch of cuts in it so I can grab onto it with the pipe wrench and then get it off. If I can do this without cutting my hand, that'd be great. Okay.
While I crucify the bird, the curse that started the tin pan of melody.
see,
And if you
I frigged it already.
walking
It's
dear,
from the cut on it.
delicious, it's be lovely.
Oil squirts by. So if you put any kind of mar on the shaft, you might as well throw the strut away.
Your sentiment.
Okay, now that I got the strut together, it comes time to check to make sure I put it together properly. And I didn't. So I have 3 and 4 mixed up there. So I should have pulled this diagram out when I was putting it together, but I was being stubborn. So there's that black washer, and then there's the rubber stop. So the rubber stop goes first, and then the black washer. And then the black washer is kind of the buffer between the top of the shock and the big washer up there. So how I did it, I got my black washer on the bottom. That should be on the top. Of this rubber stop. And this rubber stop is upside down. And this washer is upside down. So I gotta take it apart and put it together properly. Which is not too hard to take it apart and put it back together again. I already have the spring compressor pretty close to where it's gotta be to compress the spring. So when you're putting things together, even if you're in a hurry like I am today and have been for a while in a hurry, because time seems to be going by faster and faster, it seems, and I'm getting less and less done each day. You should take time and look at the instructions or find a diagram of what you're putting together. You may save yourself some time in the long run, even though it feels like you're slowing down. I was putting this together and I was like, oh, I don't need the instructions, I can just figure it out by memory. But I don't think this thing was put together properly the first time. At least how I remember it. It seems it was together wrong. But it's possible I was remembering it wrong also. Yeah, the big part up, rubber part down, flat part on the back. Yeah, just like that. So, let's see if I got it correct. And there's through the strut mount to the metal of the car body, and then there's the washer, and then there's the nut. So that's all there is to it. Okay. The bolt that holds the bottom of the strut to the axle, I'm going to spray some zinc primer on that too, because it's starting to rust out. I'd hate to have to take that strut out in 2-3 years from now maybe, and the bolt doesn't want to come out because it's all rusted in there. So I'll spray some zinc primer on that, and that should keep it from rusting any further, as long as I get the rust out of there. There we go. Looks like new again. So I'll set that out here to dry, and then go install the shock. Now that the primer doesn't stick on there very well. Guess I should grab some paint, even though I don't have any black. Painted silver. I have to see what kind of colors I have. Well, I have some silver. I'm spraying the outside of the building, but some black would be cool. I have no black paint. All I have is this black heat paint. I guess it's black, but it's not really rust paint. But it'll work. The whole objective is to keep that zinc on there. I have chrome. I have aluminum rust paint, but I don't want to spray that with aluminum. So I'll just spray the black over there, and then that'll help keep the zinc on it. And when you look under the car, you're not going to see like chrome spray painted parts. So yeah, I'll spray paint it with this black stuff, even though it's not very good paint, but it's better than with nothing on there. And when I go in tonight, I'll get some proper rust paint. Spray that down too so it doesn't get washed off. Because I want to save this strut on the passenger side. I don't want to damage it like on the driver's side. Okay, now it doesn't want to go on. Okay, so it's on the nut. I got some Allen key sockets here. Hopefully they're some decent ones. And not some cheap ones, though they were a cheap price. They weren't $100 for 5 of them kind of thing. They're 20 bucks for 5 of them, maybe 6 of them, 7 of them. Okay, anyway, I gotta use 2 hands to open that. My Allen key fits in the top of the strut shaft, and I don't want it to pop out, so I'm making sure it's in there really good. So I'm gonna put a ratchet or a breaker bar on the top here, and I'm gonna get my crescent wrench. I'm gonna use the crescent to loosen off the nut on the top of the strut. The nut was pretty rusted. It still is pretty rusted, but it's been soaking in penetrating oil for the last 2 days. I sprayed it and I filled up the cavity with penetrating oil, so hopefully that helped to loosen it up. Okay, what I thought was the nut breaking loose, turned out my Allen key just stripped out the top of the strut shaft. So what do I do to get that out of there? I can put a chisel on it and hit the one side of the nut to try to spin it free. I don't want to do that quite yet. I can clamp the top of the strut shaft where it's not gonna come in contact with the shock. Like I did on the other side, I could do that. Yeah, I'll have to figure some other way of getting that out without damaging this shock, because I want to keep this shock. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut the spring out of here, because it's pretty hard to get in there with the spring in the way. I have a new spring, so this one is gonna get nixed. So cutting it out. The shocks don't seem to go bad on it. You know, both shocks on the front of this car were good. I destroyed the other one because I had a new one, which I probably shouldn't have done, just in case. But so yeah, I'm gonna take the grinder. I'll try to get a flat spot on there, or at least scuff it up so vice grips will hold on it. So I scuffed it a little bit, not really that well. I lost the collet for my Dremel, so I couldn't use the Dremel on there, and the grinder's a little bit too big. So I have this cut-off disc you put on the end of your drill, but the cut-off disc isn't working too well on that. The metal on that shaft is harder than the disc. You know, and I can't really... maybe if I take the guard off, the grinder will fit. So the grinder doesn't fit in there with the full 5-inch disc, but one that's ground down a little bit, that's about a 4-inch disc. I can fit it in there and grind it a little bit as long as I'm careful. As long as I'm careful, because it's, I move it a little bit and it starts touching the plastic. Okay, so my grinding on there didn't really work too well. I could spend some more time on it and grind a flat spot on one side, or if you have a Dremel, you could Dremel a couple good flat spots and maybe get a wrench on there or something. You know, grind each side flat. Grind each side flat so you could fit a wrench on it, and then you could keep it from turning that way. Why didn't Bill Steen make a spot you could get a wrench on it, huh? Anyway, you can only do so much. The nut rusted on there, so I'm gonna get the wrench up as high as I can, and I'm gonna go ahead and weld that on there. Yeah, somewhere there. And then I got a spray bottle of water. As soon as I finish welding it, I'm gonna spray it really fast, because it's guaranteed is going to melt that bushing. It's, yeah, everything on top there once you weld it is probably going to be toast, but the lower part is good. Thank God heat goes up. Okay, so I cut up a pop can and I use the vice grips to clamp it on there. Oh, there's my fire suppression system right here. So I'm gonna put some water in that. Okay, that should do it. Yeah, one day I will have everything set up nice, and that'll probably be the day I retire or die. I don't know, one of the two. One day I'll have a workshop. I'll have a workshop, but you know, a real workshop. And one day I'll be a real boy. No, that's sick. Okay, so I got my wrench here. So I'm gonna weld it in place just like that, and then I'm gonna spray it really quick in my Windex bottle to cool it down so I don't start a rubber fire. But the thrust bearing, or the steering bearing on the top, and everything above where I'm welding is probably gonna get toasted. Okay. And if my wife is watching, I have my eyes closed, honey. I'm not blinding myself again. Well, the nut isn't hot, so it didn't transfer the heat up. I might break this little ratchet. I should put a bigger ratchet on the top. Yeah, there's no way a little Allen key was gonna hold up against that. I think pretty much screwed when you try to take this off with the Allen key. It's not gonna work. Right on its fit. There. So there's where I welded the wrench on. So I just gotta cut that off and grind it. You don't want to just grind it and make a flat spot there. So as I'm, I'm sanding it now with the sandpaper, but as I'm sanding it and as I was grinding it, I was turning it. And you don't want to keep your disc in one spot. So you know, as you're turning it, so you keep the shaft round. Just in case, heaven forbid it. If the front end of this car ever hits a huge bump and bottoms out and it goes past the bumpers and it hits on the part where I ground. So my thinking behind grinding it was that here's the stop. So if something happens, like your springs break and the suspension on the front end totally collapses, well, then it's gonna ride on this bumper. So there's a washer here. And then the bumper will be about right there. So you can see below the bumper I don't have any damaged area. So the only time the shock is gonna ride on that area I damaged is if it really bottoms out and compresses this bumper a little bit.
They're just not doing their due diligence. They're blindly following.
So the shock holds your, that's cool. If you ever have to replace it, you just get a new spindle.
From more and more doctors, whistleblowers,
But
those who have seen
looks like it was sitting on the shaft and wiggling a little bit before they changed it out. This part was definitely changed out before. It's nice and green grease, and there's a nice new cap on there. Probably the most important bolt that you should really torque is the bolt on the bottom of your shock absorber, that one there. All the other ones you can probably do by feel and you'll be fine. But that one there, it's 60 Newton meters. If you look on if you go to evolution.com or evolution.co.uk, they have all the torque specs on there. You might have to get a subscription, but it's not that much and it's well worth it if you have a smart car. So that bolt there is called the front axle shock absorber at support bearing, transverse leaf spring, and it says 60 Newton meters. So if you're in US or Canada, you probably have a torque wrench that is in foot pounds, so do a online conversion. So 60 Newton meters converts to 44.25 foot pounds. So torque that to 44 foot pounds. You know, if you go 45, that's probably fine too. I over torqued the other side and I didn't snap the bolt off. So when you torque it, you want it moving. You don't want to stop and then start at 45. You want to keep it constantly moving and then stop when it gets to 45 or 44. Okay, so Tell me I torqued it too high already. So we're at 35. We're at 40. There's 44, 45 right there.